Thanks everybody for joining us for today's session, Resume Writing 101, where we'll focus on how to structure, customize, and target your resume to best set yourself apart when applying for roles in your chosen field. My name is Scott Davis, your moderator and host for today's conversation. I'm joined today by three experts from top quality companies to talk you through where you should start your own personal journey on improving and targeting your resume. Leah Ciula from Visa, Melissa Hughes from KPMG, and Brittany Ramsey from L'Oreal. Thank you so much for joining us. So to get started with basics and structure, what are the fundamentals of resume writing that we should all know? And Leah, we'll kick it over to you to start.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, so some of the basics that I would say that are really important that sometimes might get overlooked. So making sure the contact information is clear, accurate, upfront, and also functional. So if you have an email that's in there, make sure that it actually works and it goes to an inbox that you actually check. And so that you can receive communications that most companies will use to reach out to you for respective positions. With that email address, also make sure that it is a professional email address, something that you would want your future potential employer to see. Additionally, your phone number, if it is a phone number as well, make sure that your voicemail is set up and that you have the ability to check those voicemails that come through too. So basically just making sure that your contact information is a good way to reach out to you and for you to receive messages.
Yes, all good points. Melissa, what about you?
So kind of kicking it back to the basics, from a layout perspective, from the way that your resume is set up, I think make sure it's simple and clean, that you use a reasonable font, no funny fonts, and you stick with Arial or Times New Roman or no Wingdings or any of those, funny fonts. And always, always, always check your spelling and grammar. Have your mom look at it, your friend, your roommate, your career center. Have as many people lay eyes on your resume to check for any typos or grammatical errors before you hit send to an employer or fill out that application.
Yeah, I love the tip of having someone else look at it. I feel like often I'm staring at my resume for hours on end, and the smallest things you can miss because you just glaze over looking at your screen. So having that set of fresh eyes is certainly a great point. Brittany, what do you think?
So I'll kind of hone in a little more on content because I get a lot of questions on what do I put in my resume. So I think the first thing is just make sure you're writing in the proper tense, which means if it was an internship or a project in the past, it's past tense. If you're currently working on that job now, make it present. So that's really important. And to start each bullet with a verb is very much encouraged. Another thing for inspiration is look at the job description you're applying to and get inspiration from there. You don't want to copy word for word, but you do want to pull out those key words that you're seeing to help inspire you, because I know a lot of people get really stuck in that space. Definitely one page, everyone. Unless you're 10 years and over, you can absolutely condense it into one page because recruiters have 7 to 30 seconds to read through. So you really don't want to make it more than 2-3 pages, which I have seen some that are 5. And then just the last thing, when you're new in your career, you don't always have all these jobs and everything like that, but definitely hone in on either projects, volunteering, or leadership projects that you can put in your resume that then build up those soft skills and can transfer into the hard skills that are part of the job.
Yeah, such a good point. And I think especially for early career candidates, putting your best foot forward, but not overstepping, if you will, and maybe saying something that's not true or not accurate or even relevant to the position you're applying for. I think the next section I want to focus on is how we should properly treat our education and training experience on our resume. And Brittany, we'll actually send it back to you first. How do you think about addressing that question?
Definitely highlight where you went to school and what your major is. And the GPA you can highlight probably up until the first 1 to 2 years after you graduate. After that, I would recommend you can remove that GPA and courses as well. but highlight that at the top so we understand what you might be able to transition. If you're just putting the school you went to, we might not be very clear on the degree and where you study. So that's what I would suggest.
That was great, Brittany. What do you think, Melissa?
Yeah, so Brittany mentioned this in the leading up to our last question about highlighting some of those relevant job experiences or student organization memberships on your resume as well. I think those are really helpful for your future employer to see some of those transferable skills, even if you may not have a job or a former internship in that particular industry that you're applying to. Perhaps some of the things that you learned on the job or some of the tasks or responsibilities that you had at that job would be transferable and relevant to the role that you're applying to. So always focus on highlighting those that can be relevant to your next role. And similarly with student organizations, I think that those are really important to add, especially if they are relevant to the position that you're applying for. If it's a finance role, maybe if you're a woman in finance, if you're in that club, I think that's a great one to highlight as well.
So good. Yeah, Leah, anything else you'd add on this point?
Yeah, well, great points. And to kind of build off what Melissa said, your experience on your resume does not have to be strictly job experience. So when you think of all of the things that you all do on campuses, whether it's a student organizations or whether it's a community organization that you partner with outside of school, anywhere that you've taken a leadership role or have done anything that you can demonstrate some skills that you've received through those experiences. Maybe it's a project that you worked on for a specific class that you really honed in on your project management skills. And while that wasn't necessarily a job, it was experience that you gained that you can really tie into the job opportunities that you may apply to. So don't limit yourself just to job experiences where you've worked. You all are very busy on campus and doing a lot of different things. So don't discredit or miss out highlighting those opportunities as well.
Yeah, I really love that piece. In a prior life, I worked in career services on a college campus, and I think one of the best lessons that I learned in talking with candidates about how to improve their resumes was thinking beyond just traditional jobs and internships as to what professional experience looks like. Being involved in a club, being involved in an organization, volunteering at a nonprofit, those are all going to produce relevant skills and experiences. They're going to make you qualified for jobs and internships that you're applying for. So I love that point, Leah. When you're applying for roles, and you're really excited for this question, when you're applying for roles, do you recommend sending the same resume to every opportunity? How do you think about aligning your resume to the job opportunity and tailoring your past professional, volunteer, nonprofit experience to that certain position you're applying for? Melissa, what do you think about that question?
Yeah, when it comes to your resume, I think first and foremost, don't overthink it. Don't stress yourself out creating your resume. I know it's easier said than done, but keep it simple and clean, like we mentioned at the top. Just keep it very simple. That way you can mold it if you want to particular jobs that you're applying for. It's always good to have a nice base layer of relevant experiences that you can then adjust based on the different jobs that you're applying to. I will also say, if you're going to put an objective on your resume, make sure that it is aligned with the job you're applying to. If you're going to list a company on that resume, make sure that you change it for every job that you're applying to. I know that's something I've seen for KPMG. We get, oh, PwC, oh, Deloitte. That's okay, but just if you're going to tailor it, make sure that you have those fresh eyes to check through to make sure you're applying, writing the right company to the job you're applying for.
Yeah, absolutely. Leah, what do you think there?
Yeah, so building up that, I think it's really important to customize your resume to the job you're applying to. Not all jobs that you are interested in likely require the same exact skill sets for everything. To Melissa's point, having that base template of the experiences you have that you know that will be broad and you certainly want to highlight across all applications is great to have. But then I think don't go on autopilot that you just have your resume ready and send it off when you have an application or a job come up that you're interested in. So really make sure that you're, reviewing the job description and then looking at your resume to make sure in your resume you're highlighting, those important duties that are part of that role, so that you can really align yourself to that opportunity based on the experiences that you've had. So certainly important to customize and look at each application as an opportunity to add, edit, update certain pieces of your resume.
Finally, Brittany.
I mean, I agree with everything these two said, but I think just to, I guess, add is really look at the skills you're adding in. And sometimes what can help is having two separate resumes of skills, if that helps you. Maybe one is more technical. For instance, I've interviewed a lot of engineers that want to get into marketing, but also curious about engineering. So if that's an example that you kind of have two pathways, then maybe make separate resumes so then you can really highlight those skills, and not overwhelm yourself with switching your resume, for every application, because that can be a lot. And one way to highlight your skills in your resume is to link rich media. So that could be linking your LinkedIn portfolio, your WayUp, or other projects that you've worked on that link to like Canva, because then it allows you to say like, well, I might not have done this job, but here's my skills. Here's a presentation I worked on. And I love clicking on those. So that's a way to highlight your skills without overthinking so much and without changing your resume consistently, because it can be a lot of work.
Yeah. I feel like we often hear from candidates who are applying for internships and jobs kind of some myths or preconceived notions about resume reviews questions. So I'll actually start with Brittany first. At L'Oreal, are you all reviewing resumes individually, or does that all happen by a computer and a machine and it just spits out a report to you?
I would love to meet this machine because we don't have one. No, we only use AI in some of our roles that are more hourly. But if you're applying to any of our early careers, so that's internship programs, fellowship, and anything beyond that, it is physically humans. So how we use AI, though, is in additional questions that you might fill out, we can filter, we can search through. We're using AI in the sense of, I'll say more on the platform side, but it's not a robot. We have a small but mighty team reading all of your resumes. So, I think it depends on the role and company. Everyone uses different platforms, but we really focus on the human eye side of looking through resumes. So, which is why it might take us a little longer to get back to you with our thousands of, of applications. But again, keep in mind that oftentimes there are real recruiters like you see here looking through your resume.
Melissa, is it the same at KPMG?
Yes, 100% there. I would also like to meet this robot because I think that would make our lives a little bit easier, but we don't want to lose the human touch. We want to, read through your experiences and see what, on paper, what you're highlighting that would align with our roles, or kind of think through what the story that you've laid out on your resume, how it would align with KPMG's culture and story as well. So no robots, just humans here at KPMG.
Oh man, Leah, do you all have an army of robots reading resumes on your side of Visa?
No army of robots, but lots of folks that are reviewing resumes, application, all of those things. And I haven't worked in a setting where I've had that robot that's out there doing those types of reviews for us. But certainly have that element of actually having humans, recruiters all across looking at resumes and reviewing for the opportunity.
Oh man. Yes, I would also like to meet this robot, or maybe, I don't know, I can invent the robot and then start my own company. It sounds like it'd be a very lucrative, lucrative business to get into. We'll wrap up with this, and I'll start with Leah. Any stories of mistakes that you often see candidates make, or maybe something that you've even made early on in your career in applying for roles? Would welcome or love to hear any kind of learning experiences that you've seen in the resume review or creation process that we can pass along to the audience today.
Yeah, I think it goes back to my first comment about the contact information. The phone number, where I've seen that a lot. And it's the most exciting time is when candidates are going to get offers or interviews or really good news and information. And we call the candidates and their voicemails aren't set up. And there's no other way to reach the candidate, not responding back to emails. So it's like really challenging to reach candidates. So I guess that's the point. I see it almost I've seen it so many times where we have good information to share, but just not getting responses through email. Maybe go to call, share some of that good information, and then there's no voicemail set up. And so there's no way to really connect with the candidates. So that's just my biggest piece, is just making sure when you are applying to jobs that you're prepared for people to reach out to you the ways that you've told them to reach out to you.
Yeah, that's a great point. Brittany, anything you'd add here?
There's two things that stand out. Just when I see a resume that has, and Melissa, I think you mentioned this earlier, but multiple fonts, multiple colors, less is more. And I think sometimes, we really want to build up our resume, make it flashy, but less is more because it's just a distraction. And another thing I've seen is when students might put in specific data that they don't know, that I guess they don't remember maybe. And so when we ask a little bit more about that, for instance, oh, you helped increase the social media engagement by X%. How did you do that? And you don't have the examples to back it up, definitely make sure that what you're putting in your resume, you can speak to. And I've done that before. When I started my recruiting career, I put in data that was truthful, but I was getting so grilled on it, I got really nervous and I gave the wrong data. And he's like, that's not what's on your resume. And I got all red and I was like, oh, I should have really reviewed what I put in my resume. So I've done it too, but definitely just make sure from a resume to an interview, you know what you have in your resume.
I love that piece. As a similar mistake I made early on in my career, not being able to speak to something that was actually on my resume. I remember one of the first questions they asked was talking about a previous experience working in data entry, and couldn't remember the situation correctly and all of that piece, and definitely not a good look in one of my initial interviews. So Brittany, I love the point around being able to speak to past experiences that are listed on your resume, because there's a good chance it's going to come up in some of those initial interviews you have with a company. Melissa, anything else you'd add here?
Just something that I think is always interesting, but funny, and make sure it's appropriate. So at the end, I feel like I've seen more lately with students adding special interests or, just fun facts. Don't put any fun facts on your resume. I think there's a time and a place for that, and your professional resume is not that. And of course, some of the interests I've seen are, Game of Thrones. I'm like, I like Game of Thrones. But I also don't need to know that when you're applying to an audit role at KPMG. So try to keep it is a professional resume. So try to keep it professional and keep those special interests to more appropriate settings, like, I don't know, if you play the violin or if you, are really like a college athlete, add those things in there, but leave the TV shows out.
I think that's a great point, Melissa, and goes back to something earlier we were all speaking to. Everything on your resume should explain why you'd be a good fit for this position. As a binge watcher myself, I don't know if it's contributing any skills to make me a quality hire for an organization, but you're right. Things like being a college athlete, extracurriculars that you're a part of, I think that can explain certain skills or experience that you might have that might be relevant to the role. So a good kind of check as you're walking through your resume. How does the thing that I'm listing here explain why it'd be a good fit at this organization? Great point. Well, that's all we have today. Thank you all again for joining us. Really enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully the audience got some really good insights and tips for the next roles they're applying for and how to craft and target their resume to put their best foot forward in the application process. Certainly want the audience to feel free to reach out with any additional questions and take advantage of the many resources available as part of Job Searching 101, presented by WayUp in Yellow. We're really excited for your career journey to continue. We're certainly all rooting for you and appreciate you joining us today.